Hello and welcome to the Horse Race Politics podcast. My name is Dr. Louis Bromfield, postdoctoral researcher in politics at Swansea University. And as usual, I'm joined by the smartest, most tuned into Welsh politics, funniest guy I've ever met. It's Professor Matthew. Oh, never mind. Election day is fast approaching here in Wales. We go to the polls on Thursday the 7th to elect our new 96-member Senedd. If you've been following the pod for the last month or two, you know that we've been getting our guests to talk through their predictions for the upcoming election using our prediction website, Horse Race Politics, available at horseracepolitics.com, where you can forecast the Senedd elections completely for free, no money involved whatsoever. If you wish to join hundreds of other users predicting the election and the thousands of other predictions that have been submitted so far, go there now. So today we thought it was best to go through all the key races to see what our users think is going to happen, in contrast to our previous episodes where our political guests have been submitting their forecasts. We're going to briefly discuss relevant current events and headlines, and hopefully by the end of this mini rant, if you will, you'll know exactly what's going to happen next week, and you'll be ready to kind of trump everybody in the pub with your expert knowledge. Before we go into the individual predictions that have been, the individual races, let's say, I thought it was a good idea to just quickly remind people what the electoral system is here in Wales. For those who are particularly switched on, the Welsh Election Study released a briefing report like a week ago, basically explaining that no one really knows what the heck is going on, and nobody really knows what the electoral system actually is. It's a little bit more complicated than just vote for the party that you want. In terms of casting your vote, it is, but in terms of how that actually translates into seats, it's a little bit more complicated. So it's called a closed list proportional representation system, and in each constituency, just the region that you're in, your vote is going to help to decide the outcomes of 6 seats out of the 96 that are up for grabs. Previously, the Senedd had 60 seats, now it's gone up to 96. The closed list part means that when you're casting your vote, the piece of paper that you actually have in the polling booth will only let you pick a party to vote for. The closed list part specifically refers to the fact that each party will have nominated 6 candidates and ordered them first to 6th to decide which ones will get elected. So if they only get 1 seat, the person that the party ranked first gets elected. If they get 4 seats in that constituency, the people ranked 1st to 4th will get the seats. You don't, as the voter, get to choose that ordering. That is entirely determined by the party. You just cast your vote for the party that you want. The closed list also refers to the fact that if, say, Reform won 2 seats and one of those candidates needed to be replaced for any reason, say a scandal or, God forbid, they died, the person that Reform ranked 3rd would automatically come in and take their seat. There would not be a special one-off by-election as we saw in Caerphilly a few months ago. Candidates are automatically replaced. When it comes to allocating seats, there is a teeny bit of math here, which I'll give an extremely basic surface-level interpretation of, so I apologize if this isn't perfect. The first seat of the 6 will go to whichever party has the most votes, the largest vote share. Then, that party's total is divided by 1 plus however many seats they have currently been allocated. So if they got seat number 1, we divide their total by 1 plus 1, which is 2, so we half their votes. So if a party gets 40% of the vote initially, they now have 20%. If they are still the largest party after that division, they get seat number 2, and the process repeats except their vote share is now divided by 3 instead of 2. So that would take them down to like 6.66% or whatever. If they were no longer the largest party and someone else is, then that new party gets the seat and their vote share is divided just as the previous party was. Now, to turn your attention to what we have on the screen, this is YouGov's most recent MRP poll, which is a way of predicting very granular geographical areas. And they show an extraordinarily tight horse race, if you will, between Reform UK and Plaid Cymru. So if we go back kind of a month or a couple of months, the recent predictions had Plaid Cymru out in a massive lead, and this race is now significantly tightened. As you'll see from the map, the area in Wales, each kind of mega constituency, has 6 little dots over each of them, representing what would be the distribution of seats in that constituency if this poll was to be correct. And what you'll see in most of these is that Reform and Plaid typically have 4 of the 6 seats in each constituency. That's kind of what we're expecting to see when the results come in, is that Plaid and Reform will be contesting most of the seats simply because they will be the parties that win the most votes. Where other parties like Labour, Tories, the Greens, maybe even the Lib Dems come in, are in those 4th, 5th, 6th seats. Because at this point, Plaid and Reform may have had their vote shares divided by, 3 at that point. So their vote shares would go down to single digits. If a party like the Greens were able to get, say, 10%, eventually they should become the largest party once all those divisions have happened, and they can sneak a seat. So if you're in Wales and you're wondering whether I should vote tactically or not, I'm not going to tell you how to vote. All I will say is that it's a much more proportional system than you might be used to in a general election. So you might be a bit better off voting for the party that you really want rather than voting against someone. So let's get into the horse race. Our biggest race on the website is which party will win the most seats. And our users currently give Plaid Cymru a 68% chance of being the largest party following election day. This does not mean 68% of the votes. This does not mean they will win 68% of the seats. This is simply which party will win the most. Reform UK is in second on a 23% chance. Welsh Labour is down in third on 5%. And Tie/Other is on 4%. With that last YouGov poll, perhaps Tie is a slightly more likely outcome. Labour being down in third is the main story of this election. Since devolution began roughly 27 years ago, Welsh Labour have never not been part of government, albeit sometimes being propped up by smaller parties like Plaid Cymru. However, Keir Starmer's deeply unpopular Westminster government has led to a mass abandonment of the party, and the victory in the 2024 election, where Labour won a huge majority off a very small portion of the overall amount of votes up for grabs, a sign of a problem with first past the post, showed that there wasn't a lot of love for him in the first place, just an anti-Tory sentiment that he rode into office. A very tumultuous government with freebie scandals, the Peter Mandelson drama and his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, the winter fuel payment U-turn, and the changes to payment plans for those with disabilities really have not painted a good image for this government. Here in Wales, Senedd Morgan's attempt to show unity with 2 governments at either end of the M4 have not exactly gone down well either, with attempts to get more powers devolved shut down by Starmer's government, and Starmer also released a private memo to his cabinet office saying that they should not be afraid to do things even though they might be against the wishes of the devolved governments in places like Wales. So much for 2 governments at the end of the M4. Senedd Morgan herself, we have launched a race predicting whether or not she is going to lose her seat, as that would be really kind of the capstone of this Labour crisis. And our users currently give her a 67% chance of losing her seat, just a 1 in 3 chance of staying on. Very dramatic times. While users give Plaid a 68% chance of being the largest party does not mean that a party can govern by itself. To be able to do that, you would need to win at least 49 seats to be able to rule without needing help from any other party. And because we're very well planned, we have a race for this one as well. Our users currently think there is just a 15% chance that a party will win enough seats to be able to govern by themselves, regardless of whether that's Plaid or Reform UK. Most projections put a Plaid minority government as the most likely outcome, as they would need to rely on votes from smaller left-wing parties such as Welsh Labour, if they still exist after this election, and the Greens. Reform UK, which we'll get to in a second, would need to rely on what looks like a much smaller voting bloc, such as the Conservatives, maybe Lib Dems if they even win any seats. But for now, we're just going to quickly focus on the Greens. Now, a year ago, Greens would have bitten your hand off at the chance to win some seats in the Senedd. However, recent projections from pollsters like YouGov have said there is the potential for the Greens to reach even as much as 10 seats, a previously inconceivable thought. Our users are a bit more cautious and give them a 39% chance to win 10 or more seats in the Senedd. However, a 39% chance is still a hell of a place to be for the Greens. What this means is that the general projections for where the Greens are going to end up is a much healthier place than the kind of equivalent smaller parties on the right. So if we take a look at the Conservative Party, we have a slightly differently formatted race, which is currently neck and neck as to whether the Conservatives will win either 0 to 2 seats or 3 to 5. If Reform were to win the most seats and be just short of a majority, the Welsh Conservatives would in effect be the first party that they look to. Every other party has said that they would refuse to work with Reform. We had Tom Gifford on the pod in the last episode, for those interested in hearing from Welsh Conservatives. Most projections, though, are very pessimistic about the Tories' odds in this election, and given our users being neck and neck, this sentiment is more or less echoed. The problem Reform would face, however, is that anything really below kind of 5 seats, and even to be fair, something like 6 might not be enough, depending on how this election goes, might not be enough for Reform to be able to actually run the Senedd. Even allying themselves with the Conservatives might not see them tip over that halfway point to be able to vote in whatever they would like. If there are a few shorts of a majority, a good performance for the Tories could help them run a government. However, it's entirely possible that this just doesn't happen. And we're already starting to see the foundations of a narrative that Reform might use that the kind of left-wing establishment kept them from being in power. And we've talked a lot on the pod about the idea of a Reform ceiling and whether there are vast swathes of those who do strongly support the party, yet they don't quite turn up on election day. And we got glimpses of this in the Caerphilly by-election, which was won by Plaid Cymru, and the Gorton and Denton by-election won by Hannah Spencer and the Greens. That when push comes to shove, the left, at least in these kind of one-off elections, is actually quite efficient at coalescing around the most viable option to defeat Reform, given that in Gorton and Denton, right up until election day, polls were estimating a pretty even three-way split between 3 possible choices on the left and just Reform on the right, yet Reform still didn't win. Reform UK might find themselves in a similar struggle to the 2024 election, where the vote on the right was awkwardly split between them and the Tories, more or less screwing them both, or they might continue to find themselves behind a strong anti-Reform sentiment. Both of these projections might just be wrong, however, and the turnout ceiling that Reform have been plagued by might melt away in this election and see a Reform largest party that can govern, potentially with Tory support. It's not the most likely of outcomes thus far, if you're to believe horse race politics users and the state of polling from companies like YouGov, but stranger things have happened. What is increasingly likely to happen, though, is that whoever wins or forms the government, be it Plaid or Reform by themselves, or Plaid or Reform propped up by a smaller party like Labour, Conservatives or Greens, the election results, combined with the same elections happening in Scotland and the local elections in England for things like your councillors, are likely to put an extreme amount of pressure on Keir Starmer and his ability to remain Prime Minister. On our will Keir Starmer be replaced as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom by the 31st of May 2026, our users currently give him will give him a 31% chance of being replaced, so 69% chance of still being in office come the end of May. For that to resolve to yes, however, it's important to acknowledge the kind of resolution criteria. This would only resolve yes if he was completely replaced. It could well be that the wheels move into motion in terms of getting him out of office. He's just not quite out the door come the end of May. So that yes percentage might be a little bit higher if we were to slightly change the parameters of the race. Starmer's main opponents for his position are 2 people, Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham. Rayner is currently the most viable option. In my opinion, all she needs to do is just get past a tax payment issue on one of her properties, if you remember that from a few months ago. And there are rumours that she might actually be getting brought back into Starmer's cabinet, his most powerful team, in order to help the party pivot back to the so-called soft left, in order to kind of change course following the disastrous elections that we're about to experience, for them anyway. However, Starmer has more or less been given about 20 of these chances since he took office to kind of reset and start again, and he hasn't really taken any of them. Most recently, with his chief advisor Morgan McSweeney stepping down, that was dressed up as Morgan McSweeney is actually the brainchild behind all of these disastrous Labour policies. Once he goes, we'll be able to reset, and they didn't do it. Andy Burnham is the current mayor of Manchester and is a very popular figure. However, he's currently not an MP, so he can't become Prime Minister, and he was blocked from standing in the Gorton and Denton by-election, as it would have triggered an election for his mayoral position as Mayor of Manchester, which could have gone horribly for Labour. Either way, it's bound to be a dramatic election. There are people alive today, including myself, who have not lived under a non-Labour-led government in Wales since devolution began, and the two options could not be more further apart from each other. Applied too obsessed with independence to run Wales properly, are Reform UK just an English nationalist party using Wales as a platform to help them run a general election campaign? Only time will tell. This podcast will be back in the week after the election to break down everything that's happened, who's in charge, what Wales might look like, and much more. We'll also be comparing things like this to reality to see what happened. Go to horseracepolitics.com to join the race and update your predictions, and we'll see who's right in more or less a week's time. Bye.